This
jump back in.
conference will now be recorded.
We're recording, as you just heard, for our YouTube channel. So really appreciate everybody being here this afternoon. This is, I think, our second kind of virtual lunch and talk. We've really been enjoying these and enjoyed our last one with the city of Sandusky. So today we're going to have a talk with Andrew Sargeant, who is going to talk about the Rockefeller Park, and then tomorrow with our in-person tour. And then I would like to introduce Elise Yablonsky, who's the Director of Planning at University Circle, who is going to introduce Andrew, talk about this chat, and remind you about the tour tomorrow. So with that, we will, again, take questions at the end of this presentation. Sorry, Elise, we'll take questions. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, put them in the comment section, and then we'll bring those up at the end of the presentation. So Elise, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Arthur. I'm thrilled to be here today to give a little bit of background on this work and to introduce Drew. The Famicos Foundation and University Circle Incorporated have been discussing for years about how to partner. And back in 2019, we started meeting regularly with the city of Cleveland to specifically talk about opportunities in Rockefeller Park and community connections and opportunities for community activation of that space. The three parties worked to jointly hire Cleveland State University's Levin College of Urban Affairs Urban Planning Studio in late 2019 and worked with them throughout that spring to complete the Eastside Parks Plan in May 2020 that started to provide a framework and put meat on the bones of what the opportunities are to better connect the Rockefeller Park space with its surrounding neighborhoods and create more active community use within it. Throughout 2020, despite the pandemic, we looked for opportunities to share these concepts with the community and engage them in this work, including hosting our first hike shops, some of which with a partner I see on the phone, Don't Brook Watershed Partnership in the winter months, and also community pop-up activations with Recess Cleveland. We also brought on partner Trust for Public Land, and with them created the Rockefeller Park Field Guide, where we've been able to engage youth in this work, educating them about the park and gaining their ideas for opportunities to enhance it. We've distributed both to local schools and then through summer camps into this summer. And then last year, we welcomed Andrew Sargeant to our team as the Rose Landscape Architectural Fellow at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. Drew studied at Temple University, joined us from Olin, and is also a Fellow of Innovation and Leadership at the Landscape Architecture Foundation. As Drew joined our team, he reviewed the work that had been done, but really further enhanced a lot of background information and concepts for this community connection and activation of the space, focusing on physical connections from the neighborhoods to the park and community use throughout the space, although we recognize there are certain spots where there's great community use now, really looking for opportunities throughout. With Drew on the team, we've continued our community hike shops and activations this summer, and we'll be doing them again in fall. So if anyone's was really looking forward to joining Drew tomorrow but can't, we'll be doing another series of hike shops throughout the park on the second Saturdays of September, October, and November at 11 a.m., exploring a different area of the park. But we hope you can join us tomorrow, again, at the Famicos Foundation. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over now to Andrew Sargeant to walk through his presentation, and we really look forward to your questions and thoughts. So thanks, Drew.
Thank you for the introduction, Elise, and thank you all for having me. And as Elise has mentioned, this committee is kind of comprised of the CECs within the area, but also TPL, some folks at the city, and my involvement. And it's called the Rockefeller Park Restoration. And let me see if I can get this up on screen. Oh, sorry, the go-to screen first. And, I think it's important to call it a restoration because as I'll allude to in the presentation, a lot of the things that Elise had mentioned in terms of access, amenities, and so forth were once a part of Rockefeller Park and great ideal in its inception and later on. And we're trying to bring a lot of that back, maybe in some new ways and forms in terms of modern amenities for the folks that live there. So a little bit of context. I just want to, how do I get this thing to the side? Does anyone know how to dock the GoToMeeting thing so it's not obstructing my screen? Oh, Oops, no.
What are you looking to do?
There's like a bar to the right side with everyone's camera. I just want to make it small because it's obstructing some of the text.
I don't know about you, but I can't see it. Can other people see it?
Yeah,
I think that might just be on your screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it smaller. Oh, there we go. Boom. There we
You got it?
Yeah, I got it. Sorry about that.
Good. Glad I was not helpful.
Okay. So a little bit of context in regards to the history of Rockefeller Park. So in 1867, essentially the park was a gift from John D. Rockefeller after he had amassed his fortune in oil refining in the city of Cleveland. And the city had already purchased the land, about 267 acres, and Rockefeller decided to just reimburse the city for the land purchase. And the park was designed by Ernest Badwich, which was a Boston landscape architect who was also a student of Frederick Law Olmsted, which kind of carried through in terms of, Olmsted being the grandfather of the American landscape, and kind of Rockefeller Park in terms of aesthetic value definitely carried through some of his teachings. But in the early 1900s, Rockefeller Park started to become known for kind of what it's generally known for today, kind of a cultural icon with kind of the birth of the cultural gardens. And by the early 1940s, at least the 10 major gardens, including the Italian, Greek, Hebrew, and so forth, were already constructed. And it was said that the gardens were a recognition of the numerous contributions of the different nationalities in terms of moving to Cleveland had done to enrich the life of the city. But in context, a Cleveland native and also a resident or of the neighborhood Glenville, which the gardens or the park butts up to, was over in Germany in the 1936 Olympics, winning 4 gold medals in the span of 9 seconds per medal, Jesse Owens. And in terms of contribution not only to the city but to the U.S., it's kind of a general contradiction in regards to this kind of level of contribution, but not being recognized within the garden, because up until I believe the 1960s, there was no talks about any level of African American garden or any garden that would denote any African ancestry within the cultural gardens. Moving forward to the 1940s, Rockefeller Park starts to become something much more than a cultural icon. By 1944, the park had a number of amenities, and if you guys lived in Cleveland at that time, or maybe had parents that lived in Cleveland during that time, they probably remember some of these amenities. Some remain, including the tennis courts and some of the paths, but some folks remember the boating island or the boating stand at the lagoon, which was twice the size that it is now. Drinking fountains, playgrounds, outdoor picnic areas, and things like that. And then in 1946, the One World Day pageant, which kind of continued kind of the cultural garden theme, which was one day of celebrating the different ethnicities within the city, with closing of MLK, which actually just happened on August 29th, which is actually a really beautiful day because it's one of the only times that the park is generally accessible for everyone with no vehicular traffic in between. But by the 1950s, as part of the Great Migration, you saw a lot of African Americans moving to the city of Cleveland from the South and moving into neighborhoods Central and Glenville. And with this influx of Black patrons, a lot of the amenities within Rockefeller Park were subsequently pulled, including the boating access and some of the other amenities as well. And this started or precipitated kind of an era of violence in the park where youth would battle over playgrounds and things like that on a regular basis. And here's just some photos of One World Day back in the day and the kind of the initial construction of the cultural gardens. The picture to the bottom right is, I believe, of the Italian garden. And like I said, by the 1960s, which was the first time that there was a formal attempt to the Cultural Garden Federation in regards to incorporating an African American or American Negro garden. And at that point, it was shot down, as it was said that the the American Negro identity was part of the American culture, but it's again a contradiction in the essence that many European ethnic groups were afforded space within the garden to, celebrate their ethnic heritage and so forth. But by 1963, again, with the kind of back and forth between different groups in terms of contention over the space, we had a big event called the Sawinski Six event within Cleveland. And the summer of '63, in regards to civil rights and activism around public space, is not just situated in Cleveland, but also generally felt in regards to kind of the nationwide battle for civil rights. So in 1963, in April, you had the Birmingham boycott starts, and hundreds of people are jailed. Martin Luther King actually comes to Cleveland and does a series of speeches to raise money for the bail bonds for the jail protesters in the South. And in the June of that year, 6 Black boys allegedly beat and attacked a teenage couple and raped a girl in Sawinski Playground, which is the event that I'm talking about, the Sawinski Six. And then, of course, later in that year, August, MLK delivers his "I Have a Dream" at the Washington Monument. So 1963 is a pivotal year, not just again in civil rights in regards to Cleveland's history, but then also in national history as well. So again, most people know, as it stands right today, most people know Rockefeller Park for the cultural gardens. In fact, if you come out of the Cleveland airport, in some of the things they advertise, the Brown Stadium and all that kind of stuff, you'll see it doesn't say Rockefeller Park, but it says the cultural gardens. And at the time in the 1960s, the contentious nature of the space was widely known in terms of the struggle of the folks that were newly moved into the neighborhood and not seeing themselves identified within the landscape. So in the particular instance of the Sawinski Six, just to give you guys, again, a bearing on geographically where we are, Sawinski Playground is located right here, just south of Gordon Park, but in kind of the stretch of Rockefeller Park. Adjacent to some of the most notable cultural gardens, again, the Italian Garden and so forth, are all kind of within this stretch as well. And Sawinski, at the time, was a kind of bastion of recreation, had a softball field, a number of play equipment, slides, swings, and things like that, featured a sledding hill, and had great access to the community adjacent. And we can see that, not only in this aerial photograph, again, how it's juxtaposed to the gardens and the community, but then also in some of these renders and photographs of the playground back in the day. You can see, again, access into the community, but then also, a wider range of recreation opportunities for folks to enjoy. And unfortunately, the Sawinski Six bears resemblance to a similar case in regards to racial profiling in public space, the Central Park Five, although the Sawinski Six happened, I believe, 20 years prior, but the similarities bear a lot of resemblance nonetheless. So we have all young teenagers, intensified by the local and national news media. There was coerced confessions without the presence of lawyers and parents. At the time, all these kids were minors. They publicized the names of the defendants, which was again against the law because they were minors. The stories of the teens never aligned. Some of them weren't there. 3 were acquitted, and then 3 were convicted. And of course, contradicting or lack of evidence. But what's important is, again, what these kind of incidents do in regards to the identity of public space, specifically in this instance, Rockefeller Park. You could see that, again, in Column Post and local news media, public space was deemed unsafe and unwelcoming because a certain demographic of people were using there, specifically young Black boys. And then here's a photograph directly from the incident featured in the Cleveland Plain Dealer of the stairwell where the alleged attacker or the alleged victim climbed up the stairs after the attack. And unfortunately, what precipitated after this event is a level of disinvestment that park has never really recovered from. So this is that staircase today. This picture was taken, I believe, in October of last year. So generally, what was direct access into the park, clear and unobstructed, is now fully obstructed and generally not available for folks to get into the park. The softball field and other play equipment has been removed. There's generally no sight lines within to the park. Again, access is generally limited, aside from this one path that is in somewhat okay condition. And what that has done subsequently to the housing stock or the housing value adjacent is also somewhat criminal as well. But just across the street, again, in the cultural gardens or in an area of the park where the cultural gardens exist, we could see a very different level of maintenance and also care within the park. So we have pretty clear sight lines within the park. Access is not obstructed. There's a variety of access, including ADA accessibility, but also stairs. And the housing stock is in much better condition and definitely highly valuable. And one of the things that has come up, and again, pushing the similarities in regards to the Central Park 5 case, Central Park has no doubt, I think, recovered from that scandal, although that it's still pivotal in folks' minds. One of the things that's important when we talk about Cleveland is extending recreation within to the winter. And, visiting Central Park of February of this year, it was one of the only places within the city where there was a number of people outside and enjoying themselves within the heights of the pandemic. I would like to remind you, amenities including ice skating, sledding, people making snowmen, and just walking and having a good time. Unfortunately, Sawinski doesn't bear that same resemblance, and again hasn't recovered from the incident or the kind of disinvestment that precipitated after the incident. So we have, the Dome Brook that runs throughout the site, which is in need of repair, which is I'll allude to in some future plans or some plans that are ongoing right now in regards to that repair. But then also, again, you can see the lack of access, but then there's some glimmer of hope in kind of these young boys who I saw out there using what remains as a portion of the sledding hill for some fun in the winter. So the big question, and again, that probes, that is kind of probing the committee's involvement, is how do we heal from something like this? We want to understand that any kind of investment or reclamation of space needs to acknowledge what had happened and why the space looks the way it is today. And again, as Elise mentioned, the committee before my involvement has contacted Cleveland State University to do the Eastside Park study. And generally, their community engagement led to some consensus in regards to the park being unwelcoming, inaccessible. Folks definitely wanted change to happen. They wanted programming. They wanted stakeholders to be involved and give a lot of weight to the folks that live nearby. Some specific changes included definitely amenities, safer atmosphere, again, family-friendly programming, events, and improved bike and ped infrastructure. And I bring up this map to say that one of the things that folks keyed in on is that they wanted the folks at the residents adjacent to have a heavy say in what the future of the park is. And we know that a lot of the patrons or folks that participate in the cultural gardens are folks that don't necessarily live in the neighborhood adjacent to the park. And it's to note that, while folks associate the cultural gardens heavily with Rockefeller Park, that the cultural gardens are less than 50% of the actual acreage or land within the park. And in order to kind of move forward in our studies and their approach with the committee, we have to kind of change the mindset that the Rockefeller Park is not the cultural gardens, and that the cultural gardens are in Rockefeller Park, which kind of opens up a lot of opportunity for reimagining what reinvestment could look like. And as Elise mentioned, TPL helped us out with the creation of this field guide, which we've been shopping around in Cleveland Public Schools and done some community engagement events. And Sawinski is actually pictured in one of the pages of the guide. This is just some photos of one of the events. We went to the elementary school directly adjacent to Sawinski and went out with Recess Cleveland and, had kids playing within the park, and then came back within the classroom and had kids write their ideas of what the park could be like. And then also I have some expertise in virtual reality and having the kids kind of design within the space of the park as well. So as Sawinski looks today, this is again a present aerial. We start to re-envision what it could look like in the future, taking advantage of some of the assets that are directly within the landscape. So we have significant grade change from the adjacent road. Again, we have some lacking of sight lines, but we have community adjacent. We do have at least one cultural garden directly adjacent to it, but overall, we have somewhat of a blank slate in terms of redesign and reinvestment into the park. So what we decided to do is come up with 3 different themes. The first of which is called Rockefeller, which kind of plays on the theme of reincorporating playground equipment or play rather within the park. And starting with kind of, scratchy sketches and then formulating it out to, kind of delineating the space. And one of the things we've tried to do is, again, keep the vernacular of the park design in respect to kind of the adjacent amenities, which of course are the cultural gardens. So, we understand that because the park is also in a floodplain, but then also again to pay attention to that vernacular, we're not really incorporating kind of what would be modern amenities, some things that you would see in like a public square. A lot of the things that we're talking about is again focused on access and kind of just articulating what is kind of open space or underutilized space within the park. And one of the things that you'll see in some of the designs or the designs that I'll show you today is that there's going to be some portion of stormwater management. And as Elise mentioned, so our partners at Doanbrook Watershed Partnership are on the phone, and they have plans to do stream bank restoration along this stretch of the Doanbrook. And we've been working with them to kind of reconfigure some of our plans in our community engagement to work within their strategy as well. And one of the things that you'll also see is that in these plans, we've also dropped in a pavilion that will feature some restrooms and things like that that we've heard within the community engagement, and a multi-use path that connects to the south of the park. And I'll talk about where that path leads as well. And then a perspective and then some imagery, again, that speaks to the vernacular that we think would fit in regards to, the adjacencies within Rockefeller Park, maybe reusing some of the stone that has come apart within the dome or matching that stone again. And the second theme is called Olmsted's Shadow, which is kind of, again, paying homage to, Ernest Badwich being a student of Olmsted and the Great American Landscape, which is much of Rockefeller Park. And again, really just orienting some of these amenities or articulating the space. As you can see, the stormwater management area gets a little bit bigger, but we still have our multi-use path, lawn, woodland walks, and so forth, and the pavilion with the restrooms up to the north. And again, another perspective of what that might look like. And again, precedent imagery of what that stormwater management area could look like, possibly with boardwalks and access for folks to kind of, understand the story of water and the watershed that leads out to Lake Erie. But then also, using water as a play amenity and place for people to sit and offer some respite as well. And then also, using the space for events, whether they're large events, as you see in the top right corner, or because we have a relationship with the elementary school adjacent, could this be in part of our outdoor classroom as well? And again, the last theme called Garden Cornucopia, which is again playing on the idea of the series of gardens, of course, the cultural gardens adjacent, and offering a more like formal layout to the space. Again, much of the amenities are generally the same, including the multi-use trail, stormwater management, but a direct link to the Latvian garden, which is the cultural garden adjacent, providing access up to the community as well via a switchback and some steps. again, another perspective, and then some more imagery in regards to what that access could look like. Again, tastefully using some of the materials that are already within the park, but then and also blending it back into nature and possibly extending some of the cultural assets. We have the art museum and other cultural assets to the south in University Circle. How can we bring and bridge some of that within to the park as well? And as Elise mentioned, we ran our first series of hike stops this summer, and we'll be starting up this Saturday again with the repeat of the hike stops going into the fall. And this has been a great experience. Again, getting members of the community adjacent that really don't know this asset exists. Elise and the team and I will joke that on every hike we hear like, "Oh my God, this is a hike." Folks have no idea that in the midst of the city, you can actually get immersed within nature, and a lot of the noise and traffic on MLK is softened or dissipates completely in some areas of the park that are generally unexplored. And again, I alluded to the multi-use trail that would extend south. So one of the things that, again, in regards to this restoration, we saw Sawinski as a place that could be a catalyst for restoration throughout the park, but we want to use it as a node to extend into other areas of the park. So this Doanside Trail is connecting from Sawinski, which you can see in the upper right corner, but then also all the way south. So there's a number of areas within the park that are adjacent, but not conflicting with existing cultural gardens that have a very different kind of landscape. These areas have been kind of left to their own devices. They're more woodland. They have a dense tree canopy, and we believe that we can, get a multi-use trail, secondary trails through there, and offer that level of amenity to the community, but then also the region as well. And then also in certain key nodes, whether it's at trailheads at the entrances of parks, but offer some amenity in barbecue and gazebo areas that we heard that the community wanted. And then some sections of what that stretch of trail could look like, whether it's separated bike lanes from the pedestrian walk, or places for pedestrians and bikes to kind of be together, some outlooks to go and look at the dome and observe the water quality, adding some level of stormwater management in terms of planting and retention. The Dome Brook, because it's in disrepair in some ways, there's a variety of ways you can have this kind of treatment in regards to an adjacent walk or an adjacent pathway. So again, another perspective of what this could look like in terms of built out, in terms of having a pedestrian path, bicycle path, but then also some peel-off spaces for folks to gather and rest. And the idea is that, because we have this huge land mass in terms of an asset, can we get some of this activity that we see on our streets that is kind of competing with car traffic into more areas of respite within nature? So can we get some of those teenagers that are wheeling their bikes in the street to wheeling their bikes through Rockefeller Park in places that we consider more safe, but then also, encouraging them to be in nature and look at plants and understand water and things like that nature. So, again, some more precedent images of what that path could look like in regards to, again, reusing some of the stones and natural material that we already see on site, but then also offering places for people to sit, meet people, and enjoy the stretch as well. Of course, this comes with wayfinding and signage, again, to keep people safe, but then also to make things easily navigable within the park. And like I said, at certain parts, offering some other level of recreation and trailheads where folks can, gather on, holidays, celebrate birthdays and things like that, and so forth. So again, we've been kind of shopping around this presentation to different stakeholders and groups, just like the APA, to get feedback. We'll be continuing to doing our community engagement, and as well working with partners like the Dome Brook Watershed Partnership on portions of the park that have already been funded in regards to restoration. And we're hoping that these conversations lead to increased visibility, but also advocacy and some traction, and hopefully some funds to restore Rockefeller Park and make it an amenity that the city can be proud of. Thank you. Is everyone still there? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Nice job.
Thanks.
Does anyone have any questions for Drew or myself? And I also want to acknowledge that we have Jim Kostelic on the line, who helped lead the planning studio work on Rockefeller Park. Sean Terry from Trust Republic Land, who again has been our ongoing partner now in this work and also supported the Rockefeller Park Field Guide, and Tori Mills from Dodebrook Watershed Partnership. So I know Drew referenced a lot of kind of connected or other ongoing efforts, if there's questions about those as well.
To show on the map where the stairs are located. Give me 1 second. So the stairs are located right here. You can kind of see there's a little bit of a path that leads to where the stairs would be, but as you can see, there's generally no access right here. So if you're wearing boots and would like to track through this, you can definitely still use it as an access point, but generally probably advise not to do that if unless you're physically able to do so.
And then Drew, can you highlight the other connection that's still there but needs some TLC?
I believe it's right here.
Yeah.
You can see it right here, but it kind of curves down a little bit and then enters the park somewhat like this.
And then to some of the other questions in the chat, Drew will be leading the tour tomorrow, and it will cover a portion of the proposed Doanside Trail from Superior to St. Casimir, as well as Sawinski Park itself and some of the opportunities that Drew highlighted.
So, and at least might have a different thought about the challenge, but I think number one, the challenge is there's always a challenge of funding, but I don't know if that's the biggest one. I think the biggest one is the understanding how to transition this asset into something more than it is today. So right now, in regards to who maintains the cultural gardens, that's all maintained by individual groups. So, you know, the Hungarian garden manages itself and does its own maintenance. Although the city still retains, you know, full ownership of the asset. So, you know, the city does mow the grass in Sawinski. So, you know, a lot of the things that we're proposing and envisioning would drive up the city's, or, you know, would make the city more involved in regards to maintenance and, you know, who's going to do the programming and things like that. And we're trying to kind of understand, you know, one, the city's appetite for, you know, aggressive restoration of the park, but then also, you know, feasibility in regards to partnerships with maybe nonprofits, you know, maybe a conservancy for Rockefeller Park, or trying to envision different ways that, you know, not only we can get the investment, but then also how it's going to actually be maintained ongoing into the future. And I think that might be the biggest hurdle. I don't know if Elise, if you think otherwise.
I would agree that that's one of the key questions is obviously funding is a challenge and these ideas are big and would take a lot of funding to implement. But then beyond that, the operations and maintenance model, the Eastside Parks Plan, the CSU students proposed a partnership, a Parks Conservancy. Actually, that was one of the big ideas from that plan. So that's been something that kind of continues to be raised as a question, is that how maybe some of this gets done, but that's very much still an open and active conversation and one of the key challenges here. And just, I think another challenge that's been kind of discussed a little bit throughout is kind of re-engaging the surrounding community in this space, because in so many places, connections that did exist have been lost. In some of these pop-up events, we've spoken to community members that remember things just being like one day being removed and feeling like they were powerless in that situation and not understanding why these amenities were going away. So these community hike shops have been, one of the key core ways that we've been trying to reach back out and establish connections here. So in terms of Chris Bongiorno's question, and Drew, you chime in too with what you've heard in terms of what things people have been most excited about. There's probably a little bit of just kind of selection bias since we've been doing a lot of hiking and it's probably selection bias with the opportunities we've been doing. So people have been really excited about kind of getting into the real parkland spaces of the park and hiking through. And so attendees have just, it's a hike in Rockefeller Park. Those have been some of our favorite feedbacks and strongest feedbacks. And we've just heard that that's, from those going on those hikes, that's how they use the space now. They're walking, but, the walking environment on MLK is so challenging because of the heavy traffic flows and speeds. And when you get off of that, it's so much more pleasant of an experience. And then I would say sledding to an active use in Sawinski, there's been a lot of excitement around that active use there. Drew, I don't know if you'd add any more to that.
No, I think Elise, you definitely hit it on the head. I think we've been privileged to have some folks that on the hike shops that remember Sawinski and remember some of these amenities. And I think generally there's a lot of excitement about bringing anything back to the park. And I think right now, again, it's generally like a blank slate. So I think folks would respond to any level of articulation and investment in regards to just getting people down and into the park and then safely able to enjoy it, whether that is articulated green space, some level of play, or also the hikes. I think right now folks understand it is generally just an underutilized asset and generally feel unwelcome. So how do we just break that that barrier or that conception around the park down with actually investing in it?
Hey, Andrew, this is Jim Costello. When the students were doing this project, they did a lot of surveys and talked to a lot of people, and you are absolutely right. People felt that they weren't part of this park. They lived right close to it, but they never went down there. The traffic just basically flows constantly down MLK, and they didn't feel that there was anything for them to really do down here. So I think your suggestion that coincides with what the students said about having facilities that people would feel they could engage in, not just programming, but also, just places to go where they could do picnicking and as you said, celebrate birthdays and things like that are really important to the people in the neighborhood. So I think you did a really nice job of putting all this together, and thanks for doing that.
Thanks, James. Some of the items that the kids wanted to see, I would say, you give kids a blank sheet of paper, or generally a blank sheet of paper and pens and things like that. You'll get like everything from like a chocolate fountain in the middle of the park to play equipment. But we've seen kids have responded they want the sled hill. So some of the activations that we've done in the wintertime featured sledding. So, how to articulate the sled hill a little bit more, a place for, possibly, pickup games, and not necessarily a ball field, but, an articulated green space and things like that. But then, some other play amenities within the park as well.
Yeah, definitely a lot of play amenities, like Drew said, some really creative things like a pizza themed park. But there was also, I think, water was a really key theme in a lot of the kids' concepts, and also for our adult attendees as well, just kind of not understanding the Doan Brooks presence in the park and wanting more opportunities to kind of see the water, somehow interact with the water, engage with the water. So we saw a lot of water components too. And if I can, I have a couple, I'm going to see if I can share it, a few more of the kids workbooks, because they're just so great. Their concepts and visions for the space. So you guys keep talking, but I'm going to try to pull some of them up because they're really fun.
While Lisa's pulling that up, excuse me, any other questions for Andrew? You can unmute yourself if you like, or you can throw it into the chat. Andrew, while we're waiting for Elise to bring that up and for any additional questions, any recommendations in terms of shoe attire for tomorrow's tour, since you were mentioning some of the more challenging areas if folks wanted to venture on those by themselves?
I would say if you have hiking boots, definitely wear your hiking boots. But if you don't, bring some athletic shoes.
Long pants.
Long sleeves, you can bear it with the heat as well. Sometimes you do get a bit of mosquitoes there. So if you feel like you have sweet blood and mosquitoes are attracted to you, I would recommend that. But there's only a few areas in which we want to caution people to kind of watch their steps. But generally, the hike is is pretty easy to folks that are able-bodied.
While Lisa's bringing it up, as a reminder, that the hike will be tomorrow, commencing at 2:30. Watching or at the Famicos Foundation office. Our location is at 1325 Anthony Road. So make sure that we'll be meeting at 2:30. So, Elise, were you able to bring up those?
No, I requested to be a presenter and it haven't been, so that's okay. But I did find one of my favorite suggestions, which was a sign that we had them both work on integration and playground, and also kind of envision what a gateway to the park could be, a welcoming space. And one of my favorite responses that we got was a student put a sign that said, "Just come in," which I really loved that idea that, just come in, it's a space for you.
No, that's awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, I don't think we see any more questions. So again, just a reminder, tomorrow's tour will be commenced at 2:30. We will meet at the Famicos Foundation office, again, 1325 Ansel Road. If you have an RSVP, we just request that you do, just so we know how many people are planning to attend, so we make sure that we wait the appropriate amount of time for you. As Andrew stated, a suggestion of long pants, making comfortable shoes, hiking boots if you have them. So we're looking forward to that. Again, this session is being recorded. So if you missed a portion of it, or if you know someone who might be interested in this, that'll be up on our YouTube page. So be sure to check that out. Again, we got some other events coming up through APA Cleveland, but most importantly, we have the Planning and Zoning Workshop, which will be virtual again this year, beginning in the month of October. Excuse me. So be sure to go to ohioplanning.org /virtual conference to register for the workshop. We'll be talking about citizen participation, equity, healthy communities, housing, transportation, and the local APA Cleveland section here. We will be hosting an in-person event and tour during the week of October 18th. So go to the website, register, check out the schedule, pass it along to your coworkers and to your friends. And then once again, thank you to Andrew, and thank you to Elise, and as well as Debbie Berry, who helped put this virtual talk together. And we look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow as part of the tour. So thank you all for attending, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.